Welcome to Colorado State University's podcast, The Audit, where host Stacy Nick talks with CSU faculty about topics ranging from their latest research to current events.
With spring right around the corner, thoughts of spring cleaning can't be far behind. There's just something about throwing open the windows and doors to let fresh air in that makes you breathe a little bit easier. In theory. In Germany, the practice of airing out one's home is a daily one, done year-round. Called lüften, it's referred to as basically burping your house. But with new research around the chemical compositions released by everything from your carpet to your paint to your stove, is a daily lüften enough? And what kind of pollutants might you be letting in? Delphine Farmer is an atmospheric chemist at Colorado State University, researching indoor and outdoor air pollution and its impact on our health. Today, we're speaking with Farmer to clear the air about how well traditional spring cleaning remedies like lüften actually work. A few years ago, you did a study on the potential impacts of different chemicals, such as cleaning products, on indoor air. It sounds like indoor pollutants hang out a lot longer than maybe we previously realized.
Yes, definitely. So we did a study back in 2018 called Home Chem. So that was the House Observations of Microbial and Environmental Chemistry. And we did all the normal activities. We cooked, we cleaned, we sat in the house and read books. And the idea was that we brought about 20 different very high-end pieces of instrumentation from, I think, about 15 different research groups from universities across Canada and the U.S., and we wanted to understand what the chemistry of indoor air was. And we encountered many surprises, but one of them was just how much stuff was in the air. So how many organic compounds were in the air we were breathing inside, orders of magnitude more than we have outdoors. And so that was really our first hint that indoor air is complicated. And so then we went back a few years ago to another test house with a similar group of people, lots of instruments from lots of different universities, and we started to study how long these compounds lasted, how they interacted with indoor surfaces. And what we found was really surprising to me, and that's that if you do something like have a wildfire smoke event outside and that smoke gets inside, those organic compounds, those air toxics associated with that smoke, they attach to surfaces and then they diffuse and bury themselves into all of your building surfaces. So carpets, ceiling tile, drywall, all the surfaces in your home start to take up those compounds.
You're terrifying me right now.
Absolutely. I'll keep you up all night. And so then we have, over time, those little compounds start to slowly evaporate back out into the air. So after a wildfire smoke event has passed, that's actually when all of those compounds that have stuck inside your home are going to start coming back out. So now your exposure to that smoke is actually extending for, it turns out it stays weeks, months, potentially even years for some of those compounds for just how long they're going to be in your home. Does that mean that they're toxic and are going to kill you? I don't know. But it does mean that what you're exposed to inside a building is really the past history of everything that happened to that house for certainly months to years.
Oh, my gosh. So it's not just things like, was there a previous smoker in the house, or did someone burn a meal? There's a lot of things we have to think about when we're talking about the history of a house.
Yes. And some of those things, I always classify them into things that we know are dangerous and things that we don't really know if they're dangerous. And so, for example, just cooking a regular meal, applying personal care products that have a scent. Certainly, those scents, those compounds are going to get onto the surfaces of a wall, but I'm not really concerned about lemon or lavender scents hurting me. But if someone smoked in a house, we know that nicotine, if it gets onto surfaces, it can react over months and change into actually an even more toxic substance that then can release back out into air. So the history of your house and your living space and your working space, it matters.
It feels almost like, I don't know if you remember this, but restaurants used to have smoking and non-smoking sections, and it was basically just one side of the room and the other side. And it was like the air mingles. It's not like it's...
Absolutely. I remember this. I remember getting on planes of the smoking and non-smoking sections, and it did not change. You could still smell it all. And absolutely, that air is just moving around. And certainly commercial buildings, there's an argument to be made that they can have strong enough ventilation systems that you're not going to get exposed to all of those particles. But yeah, that stuff just sticks around. I mean, it literally sticks to surfaces and then moves around on those surfaces. And the other thing to remember is that we also have a lot of dust in buildings. I mean, no matter, unless you're living in a clean room, biosafety level, I don't know what, unless you're in a really, really actively managed clean space, you're going to have dust in that house. And dust is really good at picking up chemical compounds. And then that dust just moves. And we've all seen it in our houses. I mean, the dust collection under my couch is strong. Even though I don't push things under the couch, it still accumulates. And so all the gases that are in the air are going to accumulate on that dust, and then it moves around. And that's where we do start to get a little concerned, because floors are where infants spend time, and children touch surfaces and can ingest things. So it is something to think about in terms of the history of homes and how different compounds can move through that house and get taken up by people.
Those dust bunnies are dangerous.
Yes. If only I vacuumed more.
Oh. I have a feeling I'm going to be doing a lot more cleaning after this conversation.
Yes, I do. The more I've studied indoor air, the more I clean my house.
So we're talking about these chemical compounds, but what are some of the dangerous chemical compounds that are typically found in indoor air? I know there's a lot of talk about gas appliances.
Yeah, so let me just clarify for a minute. There are two kinds of compounds you can be exposed to in air. One are particles. So those are really, really tiny droplets. People think about aerosol spray, like hairspray. Think even smaller than those droplets. And they can actually hang out in air for a really long time. So those are aerosol particles. And then the other component are just gases. So particles are really large numbers of molecules all put together. They're suspended, so liquids or solids. And then you have the gas component. And so we have these different kinds of chemical compounds. So things to think about. The toxic ones, I often start with thinking about formaldehyde, which you might have heard of because some of the really cheap building materials. After Hurricane Katrina many years ago, there was talk about formaldehyde off-gassing from mobile homes that were given to people. And so a lot of manufactured materials can off-gas formaldehyde, and it also just comes naturally off of some components. Formaldehyde is a known carcinogen, is quite toxic, so it's not something you want to be exposed to. So you get gases like formaldehyde. Particles are interesting because there's no known safe level of aerosol particles. They come in lots of different sizes. Depending on the size, that tells you how deep into your lungs they're going to penetrate, and then they get stuck there. Everybody's heard about particles because that was how COVID-19, those viruses can transmit. Same with measles, tuberculosis. So you can think about biological aerosol particles. Those we're all exhaling all the time. But you can also think about other components. So if you think about cigarette smoke, you're seeing the particles. Vehicle exhaust, you're seeing the particles. And of course, smoke. So anytime you burn something, you're generating particles. You're also generating gases and combustion, so the act of burning. That's something I do get concerned about because we know that there are a lot of toxic compounds. It's not like cutting into a lemon and you can smell it. Those aren't really toxic compounds. So we have those different components. Gas stoves are a whole different ballgame. They've gotten a lot of attention. I actually think, well, that attention is true in terms of gas stoves can be a source of methane, and they're a release of natural, they use natural gas, so that's releasing greenhouse gases into the atmosphere. They certainly do release particles, and they release some known toxics like benzene, but I actually think we're maybe missing the big point with cook stoves, and that's the fact that when you cook, you're releasing huge numbers of particles. And again, we know that particles are damaging to human health. So I actually get more concerned about the cooking side than I do about the gas stoves, but I do think that changing out gas stoves, if one has the opportunity to, is a good idea. But all of this can be solved to a certain extent if you have really good ventilation in your homes. So if your kitchen has a really good vent that pulls the air out of your kitchen and actually out of your house, that's a really good way to go. Otherwise, you want to start looking at using a window anytime you cook, no matter whether you're using a gas stove or not.
So first of all, you just gave me a great excuse to not cook. Mm-hmm. I'm going to lean into that.
Yeah, eat raw and purchase.
Order out.
Yep.
But also, one of the things we're going to talk about today is the Lüften, the German trend of opening doors and windows for 20 minutes every day. They call it burping the house. And I'm wondering, does that actually help with indoor air quality? I mean, do our houses need to be burped?
So this is such an interesting idea. First off, you have to know what the air quality is outside. Because if you live next to a highway or if there's a bad air pollution day here in the Front Range in Colorado, we get high ozone in the summer, or if you have a wildfire smoke event, then you don't want to open your windows because you're actually just bringing known air pollutants inside. And that ozone in particular, I have grave concerns about. So if your outdoor air is clean, then opening windows is always a good idea because then you're going to reduce the level of air pollutants that you're experiencing inside. That said, you're only going to clean your air for the time that you have your windows and doors open. So during the actual burping process, you're going to be having much cleaner air. But once you close the windows and doors, all the levels of all the indoor pollutants are just going to come right back up. So the problem is that really all of these compounds, all of these organic compounds, inorganic compounds, everything we exhale, everything we cook, it's stuck on all of the indoor surfaces. And when we open our windows and doors, we don't actually remove those compounds. So all we're doing is temporarily cleaning the air. And then we close it up, and then all those compounds start coming back off of the surfaces. So you're not giving yourself any long-term benefit. That said, if you either had, maybe you were cooking with your gas stove, or you put some toast in a toaster oven, even if your smoke alarm didn't go off, by opening the windows and doors, you're certainly clearing out all of those air toxics. Or if you clean with bleach, you use something that you don't want to be inhaling, that you shouldn't be inhaling, then yes, absolutely, burp the home. Past that, it's as long as the air is clean outside, it's certainly not going to do anything bad to you, and it will give you a few minutes of fresher, cleaner air, so that's a good thing. I don't think it's worth stressing over and trying to add it into your daily schedule as a task.
It's not a have to. I think there's something about where it's a nice day and you're like, oh, I'm just going to open the windows and doors because I just want to let the fresh air in. It just feels good.
Yeah, and that's something to not ignore. That feeling really good, that enjoying that fresh air. To an extent, maybe that's our brains or our bodies telling us that outdoor air is indeed cleaner than the indoor air. And so that's a great indicator that you should be going and breathing outdoor air a little more often.
So maybe getting outside.
Yes.
So when we're talking about the house, if it's not opening the windows and doors, is not, because you can't leave your windows and doors open 24 hours. So what can you do?
Yeah. So other than living in a tent, great things you can do for your indoor air quality. Obviously, reducing the sources. So trying to reduce burning candles or having wood fireplaces. Or if you do, making sure that the air is ventilated and clean. Avoiding using toxic products if you can. So if you don't need to use bleach, don't use bleach. If you do use bleach to clean, then clear out the air right away. But other than reducing indoor sources, then you're really left with, okay, how do I deal with all of the air toxics that are left on all of my surfaces? And it turns out that simple surface cleaning is actually a really effective way to remove a lot of those compounds. So we did this study where we looked at wildfire smoke. We added wood smoke into a house, and then we tried various interventions. We vacuumed and swept, and then we mopped the floors, and that permanently removed those air toxics in an amount that was about proportional to the surface area that we cleaned. So cleaning all the floors and all those horizontal surfaces, your tables, your shelves, that actually made a meaningful impact on the quality of air indoors. The one caveat I'll say is that we did that just after we had exposed the house. So within days of exposing the house to smoke. I don't know if that cleaning benefit is really true several months later. And so I think cleaning houses where, for example, there's been someone who smoked a lot of cigarettes, I think that's maybe a little more complicated than simple surface cleaning. But if you have an outdoor air pollution event and you can kind of catch your house quickly and you can clean it, then that's going to be really good. So every time there's a big wildfire smoke event here in the Front Range in Colorado, I do clean my house. And that's just because of what I've learned.
I think we all close up our houses, obviously trying to keep the air out when the wildfire event happens and turning on our air purifiers maybe. But I don't think – I've never thought to maybe do a little extra clean, maybe wipe down the walls or the counters and –
just the counters and vacuum and mop your floors, that's going to actually make a difference. That said, what you just said is exactly the right thing. When there is a bad outdoor air pollution event, you want as little of that air to get inside as possible. So closing up the windows and doors, you can actually, if you have an HVAC system in your house, you should have a filter in it that you should change every year. And you can just circle the air through that filter, and that filter will then catch particles. And if you have an air purifier, even better, because you're going to catch a lot of those particles. You're not going to stop the gases from getting into your house and getting onto the floors and the walls, but you are going to at least help the air quality in your house.
Mm-hmm. What about, we're talking a lot about typical houses, but I'm wondering about apartments and condos where they're sharing walls. So you can kind of control that no one smokes in your home, but you can't control the next door neighbor. So is it still just a temporary fix? I mean, what can you do when you're in that kind of situation?
Yeah, that's a really tough one. And I've lived in apartments for many years of my life. And some apartments, you know what your neighbor's doing. You know when they smoke a cigarette. You know when they cook some very, very strong smelling food. And so you know that the air is getting from their apartment to your apartment. And so in that case, you might not have a lot of control over what's going on next door, but you still have control about what happens in your own apartment. So hopefully if you've got windows you can crack or you've got a ventilation system, again, that stovetop vent hood, bathroom fans, those should all be working to remove the air outside. There's also the point that sometimes the older buildings, they're leakier, so more air gets out from inside and more clean air is going to come in. That can actually be better for your indoor air quality. It's a lot worse for your wallet in terms of heating and air conditioning costs, but it does have some benefits too. So there's a lot of factors to consider, but yes, I do think about that. If you're in a hotel room or if you're in an apartment, what happens next door can influence you. And there I would say, you start to trust your nose.
The nose knows.
Exactly. The nose knows.
What about, we talked a little bit about air purifiers. Is that something that everyone should have? Should we be focusing more on having those kinds of things?
Air purifiers, and when I say air purifiers, I really do mean a simple filter with a fan that pulls air across that filter. Nothing fancy, but those simple air purifiers, they work really well to get rid of particles. And so they're really effective if there is an air pollution event that has particles. So that's, again, that wildfire smoke, that traffic exhaust. Or if you're concerned about airborne diseases, so if you have someone in the house who has the flu and you don't want to get the flu, using an air purifier really, really helps because it reduces the number of particles in the room and hopefully starts to trap some of those particles that you don't want to inhale. So air purifiers are great. They also only work on the particle component of the air pollution. They don't work on the gas phase component. So it depends on what is keeping you up at night. Is it the particulate matter or is it the gases? And there, I really start to think about what is happening that's concerning me, and I think about what we know is a problem, because there's nothing I can do about all the stuff that we don't know about. So I think about, all right, if there, again, wildfire, smoke, traffic, something where I know there's particles, then I can control that with an air purifier. I will also say, I run an air purifier in my bedroom all night, actually 24 hours a day. And ever since I started doing that, my allergies started to get a lot better. And that's because they catch a lot of dust and a lot of pollen and any other sort of particulate matter, often things that cause allergies. There's no real downside to having an air purifier that's just a filter and a fan, other than the fact that you have to pay for a little tiny bit of energy. But they should be pretty energy efficient, and they should be pretty cheap. You can even home build them from items at Home Depot, and they're really inexpensive and they work really well.
Now, you mentioned that's for particles. So for gases, what can we do?
Yeah, so gases, I will say, again, that first thing is controlling the sources. So reducing the number of toxic components that come into your house. So actively, that's choosing what you use to clean. That's making sure that when you cook, those emissions go straight out through a vent hood. If you have a fireplace, really thinking about where that air is going and ensuring that as little of it is coming into your home as possible. And then the last thing is really actively thinking about what's in our outdoor air. And I think that the simplest way to improve indoor air is to actually have clean outdoor air. And in the United States, we have this incredible thing called the Clean Air Act. It was, I think, of all the legislation through the United States, this is probably the single piece of legislation that has saved the most lives, because it really does reduce particle pollution from various industries and some of those gas phase pollutants that we also have. So that's a really powerful tool that we have, and you can keep an eye on what that outdoor air quality is through the Environmental Protection Agency and state and local monitoring stations. And so that's a really good way to also think about keeping your indoor air clean.
Right. And we have that ozone alert. You can check on that as well.
Exactly. And I take ozone really seriously. That's a really known, again, it's a known toxic compound. And so it's a gas, and it can inflame airways. It's linked to cardio and respiratory distress and problems. We see increases in hospital visits when there are bad ozone days. So that's something that we know is problematic. And you also don't want to bring it inside, because once it gets inside, we have all of those compounds on surfaces and all of those gases in the air, and they're just ready to react with ozone. And the one that I find the most interesting is that actually our skin oils has a compound called squalene. And squalene has lots of double bonds, and so as a chemist, I look at it and we know that it is so ready to react with ozone, and indeed it does. And then it produces a variety of different compounds, some of which are known to be bad for human health. So again, that really trying to reduce outdoor air pollutants from coming in. And even more than that, not adding ozone to indoor environments. There are air cleaners that are marketed that will actually produce ozone, and that's something to be really wary of.
Oh, wow, yeah.
Yeah.
That's a little scary. Now I'm like, okay, now even I got to wash myself a little more? Or?
It's not something to really worry about. I think it's more, again, that's something to think about. Well, all right, if there's a bad ozone day, don't let that bad ozone come inside and do reactions, whether it's on your skin or on the surfaces of your house. But past that, I don't worry about my skin oils too much.
You talked about that reaction, and I'm wondering about the idea of when indoor air meets outdoor air. Do we have kind of some collisions there too?
Yes, we do. So when outdoor air meets indoor air, bad things happen. And that's really because the indoor air, I think of indoor air like a big pile of dry kindling. And so it's all this chemical fuel that has the potential to do bad things. Most of it's not doing anything bad while we're inside. But if you let just one spark hit it, then you can have a whole series of reactions. That spark, one of the biggest sparks, is actually ozone. So that's that outdoor air pollutant. And so when ozone comes inside, then you can get series of reactions, and they produce quite a few toxic compounds, including, for example, formaldehyde. So you don't want to have that collision happening. So Indoor air, it's not, most of the time, it's actually not that bad. As long as you don't bring in ozone and you keep the particulate sources, so the burning down inside your house, then it's actually really fine. Outdoor air we often think of as being pretty clean as long as you don't have an air pollution event. But yes, when you put those two together, you get a lot of chemical reactions. And as a chemist, the last thing I want happening in my home are chemical reactions.
Same.
Yes.
Are there instruments that homeowners could use to monitor their indoor air?
Yeah, absolutely. So there are two tools that you can think about as a homeowner. One are small particle sensors. So purple air is one that's gotten a lot of attention, but there are a lot of other cheap sensors that are out there that will give you a PM 2.5 number that's actually pretty good. It's really easy to detect.
PM 2.5.
So particulate matter with a diameter of 2.5 microns or less, those are the particles that we don't want to breathe into our lungs. There is a direct linear correlation between particulate matter by PM 2.5 outside and mortality rates. And so the less PM 2.5 you inhale, the better off you are. So that's a really nice one to look at. It also reacts really quickly. So if you cook and you release lots of particulate matter, sometimes you can see it. I know I certainly can when I'm cooking and maybe have the temperature turned up a little too high. So you can see that, but sometimes you don't see it. And that feedback from an indoor air quality monitor is going to tell you a lot. So something that measures PM 2.5, cheap, easy, really useful. Tells you when you should be opening your windows and doors or turning on your air purifier. Then the other tool that's really nice for homeowners is a cheap little CO2 monitor. So carbon dioxide, every time we exhale, every single time we're going to exhale CO2. So what that tells us is that outdoor CO2 is always about the same. It's about 480 parts per million. I should actually say is about 420 parts per million. So about 420 ppm outside, going up every year. But that CO2, you can go take a monitor. You can go look at what your air is like outside your house. It'll change between the seasons. It'll change depending on where you're living and what your sources are nearby. But if you have it inside, what you can watch is the combination of how many people are in your room and exhaling, plus how much ventilation there is. So if that CO2 gets high, when I say high, I mean above, I'd say 700 or 800 parts per million. So if you get above about 700 ppm, then you know you've got a lot of people exhaling combined with really poor ventilation. That's a level where maybe if someone has a cold, flu, COVID, you want to start ventilating that air. You're basically breathing in kind of stale, used air. So start breathing in fresher air from outdoors. So the CO2 monitors can be really useful as a monitor for ventilation, for how much indoor versus outdoor air you're breathing. But of course, that's a bit of a combination of people and building.
Mm-hmm. So I feel like after this conversation, I'm going to be cleaning my house more, cooking less, which is awesome. I love that.
You're welcome.
And running my air purifier a little bit more.
Yes, and that would be a total win for your health. So I totally agree with that.
All right, great. Well, thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
You're very welcome.
That was CSU Assistant Professor of Chemistry, Delphine Farmer, speaking about the effectiveness of airing out your home. I'm your host, Stacey Nick, and you're listening to CSU's The Audit.